December 22nd, 1940. A man sits alone in an underground bunker beneath the streets of London. His name is Winston Churchill. Above him the city burns. The Luftwaffe has turned the capital into a furnace. But Churchill isn't writing a battle plan. He's writing a letter of surrender. Not to Hitler, to Franklin Roosevelt. Because Great Britain, the empire that ruled a quarter of the globe, was not losing the war on the battlefield. It was losing it in the ledger. The bombs could destroy buildings, but it was the balance sheet that would destroy the empire. This is the story of how America didn't just help Britain win the war. It foreclosed on the British Empire and bought it at a bankruptcy auction. The world still thinks Britain won World War II. That's the official story. Churchill's speeches, the Spitfires, the stiff upper lip. But here's what they don't teach in school. Britain didn't win. It survived. And survival came with a price tag that would take 60 years to pay off. By the time the last bomb fell, the British Empire was a financial corpse. The real victor wasn't standing on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. It was sitting in the vaults of Fort Knox, counting the gold it had just extracted from London. This is the hidden bill of World War II, and it was written in American ink on British debt. Let's rewind to 1939. Britain looks invincible. The empire spans 5 continents. British banks finance half the world's trade. The pound sterling is the global reserve currency. London is the center of insurance, shipping, and commodities. British citizens own railroads in Argentina. They own copper mines in Chile. They own factories in New Jersey. The empire's portfolio is worth billions. The Union Jack flies over India, Egypt, Australia, Canada, and a constellation of islands that control every major shipping lane on Earth. This is not just a country. It is a financial superpower. But empires are expensive, and Britain is about to learn that you cannot fight a modern war on credit alone. When Hitler invades Poland, Britain declares war. But there's a problem. Britain has to import almost everything it needs to fight: steel, oil, aluminum, rubber, food. The island produces nothing in sufficient quantities. It must buy from America, and America in 1939 is neutral. The United States has passed the Neutrality Acts. These laws say that belligerent nations can buy American goods, but only if they pay cash, immediately, in gold or dollars. No loans, no credit, no exceptions. The law is called cash and carry. It is designed to keep America out of European wars. But it has a side effect. It turns America into the world's most profitable arms dealer. Britain can buy the bullets, but it has to bleed gold to get them. For the first year of the war, Britain drains its vaults. In a secret operation called Operation Fish, the British government loads its entire gold reserve onto warships. Billions of dollars in gold bars, priceless securities, the crown jewels of the financial empire. All of it is packed into crates and shipped across the U-boat-infested Atlantic to vaults in Canada. It is the largest movement of physical wealth in human history. The British are literally exporting their treasure to pay American invoices. By late 1940, the gold is gone. The dollars are gone. The British Purchasing Commission in Washington has contracts for planes and tanks sitting unsigned on the desk. The Treasury in London sends a cable. It says, "We have no money left. Do not sign anything." Churchill writes his letter to Roosevelt. It is long. It is detailed. It describes the strategic situation in Europe. The threat of the U-boats, the need for destroyers. But the conclusion is simple. Britain is broke. Churchill uses every rhetorical trick he knows. He appeals to shared values. He warns of the Nazi threat. But underneath the poetry is a brutal admission. The British Empire cannot pay its bills. It is insolvent. Churchill is asking for charity. But he knows charity is not how Washington operates. He is about to learn that America doesn't give anything away. It forecloses. Roosevelt understands the problem. If Britain falls, America is next, but he can't just hand over cash. Congress won't allow it. The American public is isolationist. They remember the First World War. They don't want to pay for another European bloodbath. So Roosevelt invents a solution. He calls it Lend-Lease. He explains it to the press with a folksy story. If your neighbor's house is on fire, you lend him a garden hose. You don't charge him for it. You help him put out the fire, then he gives the hose back. It sounds generous. It sounds neighborly. It is neither. Lend-Lease is a legal fiction, a way to make a bailout look like a business deal. Behind closed doors, the negotiations are not about hoses. They are about collateral. The man running the American Treasury is Henry Morgenthau, Jr. He is anti-fascist. He wants to stop Hitler. But he is also the guardian of the American taxpayer. And he has one unshackable rule. Before America gives Britain a single dollar, Britain must prove it has nothing left. Morgenthau demands a full audit. He wants to see every asset the British government owns. Every asset British citizens own, anywhere in the world. He wants the serial numbers on the gold bars that aren't there anymore. He wants the stock certificates, the land deeds, the factory titles. He is treating Britain not as an ally, but as a bankrupt company in receivership. The British negotiators are humiliated. Sir Frederick Phillips tries to argue. He explains that Britain has already liquidated its gold. He explains that selling investments in a panic will result in a fire sale, pennies on the dollar. He warns that stripping Britain of its overseas income will leave it destitute after the war. Morgenthau doesn't care. His instructions from Roosevelt are clear. Britain must scrape the barrel. If British lords still own factories in America, why should Iowa farmers pay for British tax? The logic is brutal, but it is the logic of a creditor, not an ally. The most painful sacrifice is American Viscose Corporation. It is a massive industrial company, the largest producer of rayon in the United States. It is owned by a British firm called Courtaulds. It generates millions of dollars a year in profit. Those dividends flow back to London. They help balance Britain's trade deficit. It is one of the crown jewels of British overseas investment. Morgenthau identifies it as a target. He tells the British they have to sell it. The British resist. The company is worth over $100 million. To sell it in a wartime panic is financial suicide. Morgenthau gives them an ultimatum. Sell American Viscose or Lend-Lease dies in Congress. On March 15, 1941, the British government seizes American Viscose from its owners under emergency war powers. The sale is handled by American bankers. Because everyone knows the British have to sell, the bankers drive a ruthless bargain. The company is sold for $54 million. It is highway robbery. The company is worth at least double. But Britain has no leverage. The dollars from the sale go straight to the U.S. Treasury. The British government has to reimburse Courtaulds in pounds back in London. So Britain takes on domestic debt to pay an American bill. It is the definition of a distressed asset sale. The empire is being liquidated, one factory at a time. But the liquidation doesn't stop at factories. It extends to territory. Britain desperately needs destroyers. German boats are sinking merchant ships faster than Britain can replace them. The Atlantic lifeline is being severed. Churchill begs Roosevelt for 50 old destroyers. These are World War I relics, rusting in American naval yards, obsolete, of little use to the modern U.S. Navy. Roosevelt agrees to transfer them, but not for free. In exchange for 50 barely seaworthy ships, the United States demands 99-year leases on British military bases: Newfoundland, Bermuda, the Bahamas, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Trinidad, British Guiana. Think about that trade. Britain hands over a string of strategic bases covering the entire Western Hemisphere. America gets a military footprint that will project power for a century, all for 50 ships that can barely float. It is not a trade. It is a foreclosure. By March 1941, when Lend-Lease is finally signed into law, Britain has been stripped. The gold is gone. The investments are being sold. The bases are leased. The treasury is empty. Lend-Lease is hailed as the arsenal of democracy. In public, it is presented as solidarity, and in many ways it keeps Britain alive. Without it, the Nazis would have starved the island into submission. But the terms of the deal plant a time bomb. The aid is not a gift. It is a lease, and embedded in the agreement is Article 7. It is written in dense diplomatic language, but it is a poison pill. Article 7 says that in return for the aid, Britain must dismantle its imperial preference system after the war. Imperial preference is the economic glue holding the empire together. It is a system of tariffs. British goods get favorable treatment in empire markets: Canada, Australia, India, South Africa. It means British cars and textiles are cheaper in those markets than American products. It protects British industry from more efficient American competition. By signing Article 7, Britain agrees to tear down its own economic walls. It agrees to let American companies flood into empire markets. It is signing the death warrant of its trading bloc. The British negotiators fight it. They know it means the end of the empire as an economic unit. But the bombers are overhead. The U-boats are in the Atlantic. The money is gone. They sign. When America enters the war after Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the alliance becomes official. American soldiers pour into Britain. The island becomes a giant aircraft carrier for the U.S. Army Air Force. But the financial gap only widens. American industry explodes. Fueled by government spending, the U.S. economy grows at record rates. Britain's economy is being cannibalized. Every factory is converted to war production. Britain stops making consumer goods. It stops exporting. It abandons its commercial markets in Latin America and Asia. Who fills the vacuum? American companies. While British factories make Spitfires, American factories make Spitfires and refrigerators and radios for the world market. America is fighting the war and stealing Britain's future at the same time. By 1944, the transfer is complete. The gold reserves of the world have moved from London to Fort Knox. The financial center of gravity has shifted to New York. The British assume their sacrifice will be honored. They believe that because they fought alone for 2 years, because they bankrupted themselves, the Americans will be generous. They believe Lend-Lease will continue after the war, a transition period. A soft landing. They are wrong. They have forgotten the lesson of the viscose sale. In high finance, gratitude is not legal tender. August 15th, 1945. Japan surrenders. World War II is over. In London the crowds celebrate. Bonfires are lit. Strangers embrace. Britain has defeated tyranny. But 7 days later, President Harry Truman signs an order. Lend-Lease is terminated. Immediately, the cutoff is absolute. American ships in the middle of the Atlantic carrying food and supplies to Britain are ordered to turn around. The lifeline is severed. No warning, no grace period. The aid stops the moment the guns go silent. The British government is paralyzed. John Maynard Keynes, the greatest economist of the century, looks at the numbers. He sees catastrophe. Britain imports half its food, almost all its raw materials. It has been paying with Lend-Lease dollars. Without those dollars, Britain will default. Not in a year, instantly. Keynes calculates that Britain faces financial Dunkirk. The country will have to stop importing food. Rations will be cut below wartime levels. Factories will have no raw materials. There will be mass unemployment, social collapse. There is only one option. Britain has to beg. In September 1945, a dying Keynes boards a ship to Washington. He is exhausted. His heart is failing. But he is going to plead Britain's case. Keynes believes he has a moral argument. Britain fought alone. Britain sacrificed its economy to save civilization. Therefore, America should give Britain a grant, $6 billion, not a loan, a retroactive payment for services rendered. He calls it justice. But when he arrives in Washington, justice is not on the menu. The American negotiators are cold. The war is over. The American public is tired of paying for Europe. Congress is suspicious of Britain's new socialist government. They don't want American tax dollars funding nationalized industries. The Americans tell Keynes bluntly, no grant, no gift, only a loan, with interest. Keynes is devastated, he argues. He warns them that crushing Britain will weaken the West against the Soviet Union. But the Americans hold all the leverage. They offer $3.75 billion, barely enough to survive, and it comes with conditions designed to strangle what remains of British economic independence. The worst condition is sterling convertibility. Within 1 year of receiving the loan, Britain must make the pound fully convertible. Anyone holding pounds can exchange them for dollars. The Americans call it free trade. In reality, it is a trap. During the war, Britain forced its colonies to accept pounds but banned them from converting to dollars. This created a closed loop. Countries like India and Egypt could only spend their pounds on British goods. It protected British markets. The Americans want to smash that loop. Keynes knows convertibility is suicide. The moment the pound becomes convertible, everyone will sell. They will dump pounds to buy dollars, because everyone wants American goods, American cars, American machines, American everything. There will be a run on the pound. The loan will evaporate in weeks. Keynes fights until his health collapses, but the alternative is starvation. In July 1946, the British Parliament votes to accept the loan. They call it a financial Munich. Appeasement to survive. Keynes dies a few months later. His heart gives out under the strain. The winter of 1947 is the coldest in memory. Blizzards bury Britain. Coal freezes. Power stations shut down. Factories close. People shiver in the dark. No electricity. No heat. It is in this frozen nightmare that the cost of victory becomes clear. Britain won the war, but its people are colder and hungrier than they were during the Blitz. Bread, which was never rationed even during the darkest days of the war, is rationed in peacetime. The age of austerity has begun. On July 15, 1947, per the loan agreement, Britain makes the pound convertible. The result is exactly what Keynes predicted. It is a massacre. The world rushes to sell pounds. Countries that stockpiled sterling for years dump it. They want dollars. The American loan evaporates. In 1 month, Britain loses hundreds of millions. The hemorrhage is so violent the government watches its reserves vanish in real time. After just 5 weeks, on August 20th, the British government suspends convertibility. They slam the window shut. They crawl back to Washington and admit failure. They have burned through a massive portion of the loan for nothing. The humiliation is absolute. This financial collapse had immediate geopolitical consequences. In February 1947, Britain sent a confidential telegram to the U.S. State Department. It was a message of surrender, not to an enemy, but to reality. For a century, Britain had guarded Greece and Turkey, blocking Soviet expansion into the Mediterranean. Now the money was gone. The message was blunt. We are broke. We are leaving. If you want to stop communism, you must take over. That telegram triggered the Truman Doctrine and marked the moment Britain ceased to be a superpower. 2 years later, the pound was devalued from $4.86 to $2.80. Overnight, Britain became nearly 40% poorer. Imports surged in price. Living standards fell. The empire that once financed the world now depended on foreign credit. The 1946 Anglo-American Loan was not aid. It was debt with interest. Payments continued through the post-war boom, the oil shocks, and into the 21st century. The final installment was paid in December 2006, 61 years after the war ended. 3 generations paid for survival. World War II is remembered as a moral victory, and it was. But economically, it was the greatest transfer of wealth in modern history. Germany lost and was destroyed. Britain won and was bankrupted. The United States emerged dominant. Its economy doubled. Its gold reserves unrivaled. Britain traded empire for survival. It was the only choice. But it cost everything.